and welcome in to the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner. Today I am super excited to be joined by my good friend, Rick Partlow. If you have followed the podcast for a while, then you are very familiar with Rick. He joined us last year or the year before on a writing challenge that we had and had a great time with Rick and some other folks. And Rick has been no stranger to the podcast in other capacities as well. Rick is one of the most prolific science fiction authors that I've ever had the privilege of meeting. And I just invited him to come on the podcast to talk about what's going on in writing and publishing in 2024. Where is genre publishing now, as indie publishing specifically has matured over the last decade? And Rick definitely had his feet in the indie publishing world and also publishes with some small to medium-sized presses as well. He has a unique perspective. And so we wanted to have Rick back on to kind of catch up. Welcome back to the show, Rick.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And fair warning to everyone listening. I had COVID last week and am just getting over that. So my voice is a little weak, but I think we will persevere. Rick, what's going on with you, buddy? As I see you post on Facebook all the time, today I published my 485th book.
I would.
How many?
I just finished writing book 74, which is book 16 in the Drop Trooper series, which may be the last book in the Drop Trooper series.
Yeah.
I left room to write more, but for right now, it's at least going to be the last book for a while, because I feel like both me and the readers are a little burned out in that series. Partially my fault, because the key I found in my own experience and talking to others who publish for a living is if you're going to write a series that long, you have to write them more quickly. At some point in Drop Trooper, it got to be every 3 to 4 months or so instead of every 1 or 2. And it's hard to keep an audience with a gap of more than 2 months between books on a long series.
Yeah. That's interesting to me because, if you go back to the world of traditional publishing, you're talking about one book a year typically. There are a handful of authors,
maybe exactly 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a literal handful of authors that publish twice a year sometimes, and a lot of times those are 2 different series that they kind of bounce back and forth to.
Yeah.
So is this a phenomenon born of indie publishing?
It's a phenomenon born of Kindle Unlimited,
more
than anything else.
Interesting.
Because Kindle Unlimited readers, they are fans of a genre. They are not fans, for the most part, of writers. I have people who are fans of me in particular, but that's a group of people that are definitely going to buy my, at least 1 or 2 series of mine. But that's a small group, comparatively small. Say it's at the most maybe 10,000 people, maybe not even that. But, that's a certain amount of income you can get on a book you put out, and it's good to have those people. But if you want to have a series that goes on and you keep making money from, you have to maintain like all 10,000 reading every book in the series. And that's usually not how it goes. Usually people will, they will read maybe the first, few books, the first story arc, and then a lot of them will drop off because, there are people who don't, they don't want to follow those characters. I don't like the new story arc. So you're not going to take along the whole 10,000 people that like your books in general. So what you have to do is attract the generic whale readers on Kindle Unlimited who are fans of military science fiction. But military science fiction is a very, very saturated market. So the only way to make these people read your next book for sure is to have it on pre-order at the end of the previous book, so they can just go, oh yeah, I read this book, now here's the next one, and I'll read it too. So if you don't have the book pretty much available within a month or two of the last one, then you're losing those people. So yeah, it's difficult to write a really long series unless you do what, say, Terry Maggart does,
Mm-hmm.
and just crank them out one after the other to make sure that there's only a month between them.
Which and keeping up with a production schedule like that, how do you keep burnout at bay? And how do you not get disgusted
Burnout.
with characters?
Burnout's not the real problem.
Yeah.
Um, the real problem is, I mean, I can crank out the words every day. That's not a problem. The real problem is getting stuck with one series,
Hmm.
um, because say you're writing a series and you want to get those books out every month, but what if the money from that series stops coming in? Well, then you have to wrap up that series to make sure it ends in a acceptable manner, and
Hmm.
then get on another series. And in the months that you are taking to do those two things, you're not making as much money as you want to. You're not, maybe not paying all the bills you want to. So it's it's a danger if you concentrate on just one series. I mean, and I know people who do this. They will write the same series month after month after month,
Hmm.
and if it works out, that's the way to do it, because that's the way you can make money. But if at any point that series drops off, then you're going to be facing a lean period, and you better have some savings.
Right. It's so wild to see how publishing has evolved and matured over the last decade and a half, I guess is a realistic window. Um, Back a decade or so, the conventional wisdom was to build your back catalog so that when
Yeah.
someone discovered you through a book, then you had a bunch of books to sell them. Um, is that still something that happens? Do you find people discovering your back catalog, or is it more attuned to like the Kindle Unlimited now, where people are finding you and they're
Yeah, no,
reading along with
the
you?
back catalog strategy doesn't work anymore. In general, um, let's put it this way: I have 73 books published right now. We'll have
Yeah.
74 probably within a month. Um, Almost all the money I make every month or quarter comes from the last 10 books I published. And I
Wow.
get next to nothing from all those other 64. Um, and it's not like, I mean, it's possible that you can revive a series briefly with advertising,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where as long as you're putting the money into advertising, you may make slightly more money, but it's never going to take off on its own. Amazon has made it so that people don't find those books on their own. It used to be that if you had a successful series, Amazon would recommend your older books to
Right.
readers. They don't do that anymore because everything has to be pay to play. So if you want a series to be visible to readers without them like searching for your name, then you have to pay for advertising, and you have to do it constantly, because there's no point where you can say, "Oh, I've paid enough. Now they're going to be able to find me." No, that doesn't happen. So no, you cannot count on a back catalog anymore.
Wow. Wow. TW asked, how many words tend to be in your books in a series? You typically write about 100,000 words per book.
Um, Most
Is
of the
that safe?
time, it's between 80 and 100,000.
Yeah. Is that pretty typical in the military sci-fi space?
100,000, 120,000 is what's usual.
Yeah.
I mean, some people write longer.
Yeah.
Almost nobody writes shorter.
Right. Right. Um, you began indie publishing, made a big splash. Um, was doing pretty well as a strictly indie publisher for a while, and then you started publishing with Athon Books, and also with J.N. Cheney. You guys have a series, the Taken to the Stars
Yeah,
series. And,
I've actually
um,
I've had two series with them. One was Sun Killer, and the other one's Taken to the Stars.
Killer. That's right. I couldn't remember that.
There's only
Um,
3 books in Sun Killer.
yeah. Do you think about those books differently? The ones that you publish with Athon and the ones that you publish with Cheney. That just from the surface, it feels like the ones that you publish with Cheney are more. Um, how can I say it?
Lighthearted.
Lighthearted, more character driven, and I don't mean that your like Drop Trooper series is not character driven, but there's it tends to be a tighter focus, um, a a more personal story, if you will. Is that intentional?
I don't know if I would agree that. I think they're both. Basically, everything I write is more about characters than
Yeah,
it is uh, plot. I mean, there is plot there, but I think I think the difference between them is that in Drop Trooper, I'm trying to be more. I don't know how to like. I don't say realistic, but
yeah.
kind of more down to earth as far as like the realities of war, the
Grittier
mentality of
read sometimes.
pardon.
A grittier read
Yeah,
sometimes.
grittier. Yeah, darker, grittier. Um, Whereas Taken to the Stars is more an adventure. It's like
Yeah,
Star
adventure.
Wars or Guardians of the Galaxy. It's I mean there's parts of it where it gets grim, but it's not basically not gritty. It's an adventure story. Um, you know, throwback to a lot of adventures from say Edgar Rice Burroughs or
Right.
that type of thing. It's not meant to be taken in a kind of realistic. This is how the future could play out type of way.
Right. Right.
Now, I would say that the reason for that is not so much that it's not so much that Athon demands me to write anything dark and gritty. It's
Right.
that J.N. Cheney's audience prefers adventure type stories. So you give people what they want to
Yeah.
read. Um, Now that may be changing because I've talked with the people at Athon, and they feel that the nature of the science fiction audience is changing. That that they I guess they want stuff that's lighter and less grim, probably because of the old trope that the more grim things are in the world, the more lighthearted things people want to read.
Right.
Things are pretty grim right now,
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
so I may be writing some more lighthearted stuff for Athon as well.
well, that's awesome. I love the Taken to the Stars series. The Sun Killer I really enjoyed too, but Taken to the Stars is still ongoing.
Yeah,
Um, so it's kind of more top of mind.
it's going to
Um,
go at least 12 books.
nice.
It may go as high as 20. We're not sure. It depends on how the sales go in the next few.
Yeah.
It's been a really successful series. Not not backyard starship successful, but it's been doing very well. So
Did,
we'll keep writing it.
is that series easier to write for you than
Oh,
say
much
Drop
easier.
Trooper? Yeah. What is it about it that makes it easier?
There's not. Well, Drop Trooper was a 16 book series that's set in a universe that has something like 45 novels written in it. So I've got
Mhm.
so much stuff to remember that it's ridiculous how hard it was to keep track of all the characters, the planets, the technology. And I contradicted myself in that universe several times because I started writing it in the 90s, that
Right.
universe. So I made technological choices back in the 90s that I kind of contradicted when I started writing books in the 2010s. So it's there's a few contradictions, nothing earth shattering, stuff that I could hand wave away if I really was
Yeah.
of a mind to. But it's much easier dealing with just one. Just I mean, I'm working on the eighth book right now, but 8 books is a lot easier to deal with than 45.
Oh, sure, sure. Also, I would imagine it gets more difficult when you are a career science fiction author. Um, as the world changes and technology grows and matures, and science fiction becomes science reality in a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
senses, and then you have to think about, okay, well, this thing has kind of come to
it's happened
fruition
so many
now.
times. Uh,
Yeah. So, like, what
I
can
started
I?
I started writing science fiction as a kid, but I mean seriously writing for publication in the late 90s.
Right.
So there's a lot of technologies that I put in these books that seem very futuristic at the time, and they were like things that you would read in the speculation articles in
Yeah.
like Analog or in collections of anthologies. Like Jerry Pournelle put out one called "There Will Be War," and in every
Okay.
one of those he had a bunch of war stories, but he also had several speculative fact articles talking about what could happen in 200 years. So I'd use all that technology, and then we got it now. you know, um, like for instance, just this is just an example. You've probably heard of the rods from God.
Yeah.
The idea of taking a satellite with tungsten, 6 foot long tungsten rods with
Mhm.
steering vanes on them, and you can target things on the ground with them. And that's something that I thought was really cool and was a big deal back then. And people thought, oh, that would make a. But the thing is, now we don't need those. Those would add a layer of expense and complication to the problem that we don't need because we have hypersonic missiles you can launch from an airplane that can do the
Right.
same thing, hit anywhere in the world, with just the same amount of accuracy and can't really be stopped. And I mean, we can stop them, but the enemy can't
Yeah.
stop them for the most part. Uh, it's just science seems to be advancing in a way that a lot of people did not anticipate, particularly
Yeah.
when it comes to computer technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually make a point in my latest Taking the Stars novels. The main character is a college student from the late '80s who gets abducted and put in stasis for 35 years, and he wakes up and he has all these adventures, and eventually he goes back to Earth, and it's 35 years later. It's the present on Earth, and he's from 1987. So he's like dealing with all that. But one thing that turns out to be kind of funny is that they have the aliens have these advanced starfighters, with all this beam weapons and hyperdrives, but the targeting computers on American jet fighters are more advanced than the ones on the starfighters. So they have to like refit them with those because
Oh, that's
it's a difference in philosophy. Like the all of the warrior societies in this alien, empire, they kind of have that old mentality of it's got to be the guy doing it or the woman, the actual warrior in battle, and using
right.
computers is cheating. So
Okay, however you want it.
that's
um,
that's been really. I mean, I added something in a book, one of the first ones I wrote for publication, that seemed really far out to me. Something that wouldn't be around for a long time back in the late '90s when I wrote it. Um, the main character, this special forces guy, has this handgun. When he pulls it out, this electronic sight pops up from the back, and you got a little red dot. Now that's just like everybody has one of those.
right.
Yeah,
That's so funny. Yeah, deer rifles have that. That's just nothing special.
yeah.
Um, when you started writing Taken to the Stars and the Sun Killer series, and you started changing the tone of the books you were writing, if not necessarily, um, I mean, subject matter, yes, but you're still within the same veins of science fiction, roughly. Were there uh, was it difficult to get readers to follow you over to a series that was kind of different from what you have been known for?
Well, I have written stories like that before. I wrote the Earth at War series. Um, that was with Scott Bartlett and his Permantha Press, although
Yeah,
it's since been bought out by Athon. Um, and it was that same kind of. I mean, there was kind of a grittier thing to it, but it was also an adventure style series with funny aliens, in a unlikely scenario, and just very very Star Trek, Star Wars type
yeah,
of looseness with the technology, but I think those people will follow me. But really, the impetus, I guess, is the word I'm looking for writing that type of novel over there was because Jeff Chaney has his own audience, J.N. Chaney,
right.
and that's the kind of book they like to read. They like it written in a certain kind of voice with a certain kind of pacing, and the reason that a lot of writers who've been successful in their own, like um, Jonathan Brazy,
Hmm.
uh, the reason those people want to write with Cheney is because you don't have just your own readers. You also have a big, big collection of Cheney readers who are interested in lighthearted, adventurous science fiction and will read it. No matter whose name is up there with Cheney's, they'll read it.
Right.
Some writers are less sanguine about that. They're like, oh, I wrote, it's my book. Why should Cheney's name be on it? All he did was consult with me on the plot. Well, yeah, Cheney. I mean, people want to downplay it, but Cheney has a style of book that he likes to put out, and that's why he consults on every series he writes, and he goes through over the outline with you and the characters, and he gives you ideas that can make it more successful. And if you're smart, you'll listen to him.
Because he
And
knows his audience.
yeah, he knows his audience, and he's on every one of those covers because he's not going to publish a book with his name on it that he doesn't think his audience will want to read. So he's very involved in every book. He doesn't write the words,
Mhm.
he doesn't write the prose in the book, but he makes sure that the plot that we wind up with is one that his audience is going to like. That's why his name is on there. And he does publish books from other people, and his name is not on those books. And those are a different tone. They're not in that I don't say genre, but kind of subgenre tone, whatever. They're
Yeah.
not necessarily the adventurous, lighthearted thing. There might be more grim. They might be more uh, straight military science fiction or straight literary science fiction or whatever. But he makes clear to people that okay, the ones with my name on them are the ones you like to read, and he's got a huge audience that loves to read those style of books. So if you're smart and you want to get eyes on your words, you do what he says, and and you accept his name on the cover, and you have a lot more success. Just,
Yeah. Yeah. In juggling series that you're publishing with Athon, series you're publishing with Cheney, um, how far in advance do you have your writing scheduled out, and how do you balance going back and forth between projects, between publishers,
um,
and
up
I guess
until
kind of keep
recently,
reader expectation?
up until recently, I had been writing a book for Athon in a month or just over a month, and then a book for Cheney in a month or just over a month, and I've been alternating. And now, since I wrapped up Drop Trooper, at least for the time being, I may write a few books ahead for Cheney, and then write a few books ahead for Athon. I have decided how I'm going to be doing it in the future, but up until this point, everything was pretty much scheduled in perpetuity forever. A
Yeah.
book for one and then a book for the other, um, and that worked okay. But I think I might have gotten to the point where I want to try something different. So I might, like for instance, right now I'm wrapping up Drop Trooper. World War Mars is over for Athon, and I have a series that I have proposed to Athon that they like, and I'm going to work on that. But I might like I'm working on book 8 of Taken to the Stars right now. I might just go ahead and do 8, 9, and 10 over a 3-month period, get those done, and then just do the first 3 novels in the new Athon series and do that over a 3-month period, and then write 3 more. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in flux as far as that goes. Um, but for a long time, it was for over a year. It's been alternating one book a month for each of those. For
Have
each
you
of them.
ever have you ever thought about writing um completely outside of science fiction and
Oh yeah,
writing like a like an espionage thriller or
not
something?
espionage because I don't read espionage for the most
Yeah.
part. But I've been wanting to write an epic fantasy series for 25 or 30 years, and I've never done it. I've
Yeah.
changed the plot and the background and the world like 5 times, and I don't have the time because it would take it would take me basically taking a year off from everything else to write this trilogy, which um, indie fantasy doesn't sell well. Not
Yeah, why
epic
do you think
fantasy.
that is?
I don't know.
Because traditional fantasy is one of the biggest
Yes,
genres
traditional
on the planet.
fantasy is huge. I think maybe the people who like traditional fantasy are not to not to be too glib about it, but they're traditional readers and they like going into the bookstore and getting the book off the shelf and
True.
feeling it in their hand.
Yeah.
The people who read science fiction for the most part are tech heads who like reading it on Kindle or want to hear it on an audiobook.
Right.
But a lot of the fantasy audience is still people who take hardback books off the shelf.
Yeah. Do you
Um,
think the fantasy genre tends toward celebrity authors? Or do you think fantasy readers tend to latch onto an author more than necessarily a series? Or like I know people who will go buy the new Brandon Sanderson book and never read the back cover. They have no idea what it's about, but because Brandon wrote it, they're going to buy it.
I think traditional publishing in general follows the author more. Indie publishing does not. I think there's been a lot of authors, a lot of indie authors who have attempted through the last 10 years to get to the point where people follow their name
Right.
or at least their series instead of just the genre or subgenre. And for the most part, like in the vast majority of cases, they've not been successful doing that. Some have thought they've been successful, but at some point they realize, no, they're not following my name. They're following this series, or they're following, the fact that I've released these books so quickly. But
Right.
nobody that I know in the indie market has managed to get name recognition. You can get series recognition, but as far as the author goes, a friend of mine, Steve Boyer, from
Yep.
Athon Books, was mentioning to me the other day that he was talking to somebody he knows personally, um, like not through the business, but
Yeah. It's
and
somebody
he
in
was
real life.
yeah, and he was saying he was making this point. That's not true. I follow authors, and it's like okay. And later on, they were talking, and the guy mentioned um, "Cold as Hell,"
Yeah.
which is
Which
Jamie
Steve wrote.
Castle, Steve Boyer, and Rhett as
You
well,
know.
and Bruno. And the guy didn't know who wrote it. He did not know that Steve had written the book.
Wow.
And he's like, "Oh, maybe you're right. I don't know who the authors are." People, when it comes to any books, people don't follow authors. And in traditional publishing, they do. And I don't know how to change that. It may not be possible. J.N. Chaney is the closest anybody has come to creating a following just for his name. And I don't know that anybody else could manage it because it has taken him years and years, and not just years and years of putting out the books, but of building huge newsletter
Right.
mailing list, of building a huge Facebook group that with like almost 50,000 people, um, in a lot of money and effort. And most people would not have the focus, the almost monomaniacal focus, to be able to do that over a period of 10 years,
Yeah.
And he started young. He's
Yeah.
very visionary when it came to that. Most people can't do that. Most people don't have the time or the money or the mental focus to do that. And
He's really taken the James Patterson approach.
yes, he has.
You know, Patterson
Actually,
seems
I
to
think he
really
probably
operate.
he probably puts more personal attention into the books than
Oh,
James Patterson does.
I'm convinced of that. Yeah. But
But I feel like he's a unicorn in that case
yeah.
because, pardon me. Now I've got the same problem you do.
That's what mute buttons were made for.
So yeah, he may be a unicorn in that case because I've not seen anybody else able to do it. Athon has come very close, not with the author's name though, as much as with their
With the
publishing company,
brand. Yeah.
their brand. Um, but Athon also has basically cornered the market on the lit RPG, the best lit
Yeah.
RPG authors. So,
Which I still don't understand as a
I
reader.
don't
I,
need.
I love that people love it. I really do. I like if it's your thing, I'm super happy that there's a thing for you now. I just don't get it. I don't. I, I
um,
don't.
well, I think it's similar, uh, similar in kind of mindset to the people who will watch other people play video games on YouTube.
Yeah, it's like a genre made for the Twitch audience
Yeah,
or something.
basically, it's it's people who are not interested in. I don't want to say this I'm not going to say. This is going to sound like I'm insulting them, but I'm not. It's just different types of people. These are
Yeah.
people who are not interested in literary style reading. They're
Yeah.
not interested in pacing or plot structure or character arcs or any of the stuff that you and I built our careers learning that this is the way to write.
Right.
They're interested in the journey of watching a character who is basically overpowered uh, and really smart beat other people in what's essentially a video game. Just like those people watching other people do speed runs on YouTube,
Right.
they're interested in watching this character just kick butt, and
Yeah.
they will read 200,000 words, and a quarter of them are stats
Yeah.
because that's what they like to read. I mean, it's the story they want to read. I don't get it. I couldn't write it. I can't. I'm too old to change my way of
Yeah.
writing to that. And also, I know a lot of people who tried to dip their toe into lit RPG because those authors are making millions of dollars.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Steve and I
you
have had a
can't you
conversation
can't
about
you
some of these
can't jump
before.
into lit RPG and have that kind of success. These people who make millions of dollars, they built an audience of hundreds of thousands of people by giving away their stories one chapter at a time on Royal Road for years. And they built up a fanatic audience, and many of them have Patreons that pay them more per month than I make in a year. You
It's
know,
so wild.
so they don't even need this money coming from their Athon books to live off of because they've already got people who are so dedicated to them that they will just give them money every month.
That's so
And it
wild.
must be nice. I wish I had. It's one of those things where you get with me 7 years ago or 6 years ago and say, okay, this is how you will be financially secure for the rest of your life, and I would have done
Yeah.
it.
Right.
But it's too late for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have. I'm afraid that I don't have enough time in on the Xbox or PlayStation to be wired that way. Anyway. We're sounding like a couple of old men raging against
Well,
the.
I am an old man. I'm not raging against it.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that I'm too late to jump into.
Yeah. Same. Same.
It's not going to happen because I don't have the time or mental energy to go on Royal Road and start putting out 200,000 words
Yeah.
every 2 months and releasing it a chapter at a time. 'Cause that's what these people do. They will write 200,000 word books and they'll do it in a couple of months. And these books release at full price and they're in the top 50 on all of Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know how much money that means.
Yeah. It means a lot of money. It means a lot of
Yes, it
money.
does. And if like I said, if I had been told 7 or 8 years ago, this is what you have to do, I am not too proud not to have done it. But it's
Yeah.
it's a train that's passed, and I
Yeah.
can't jump on.
You said something a minute ago, Rick. When I said, would you ever write like an espionage thriller? And you said, well, I don't read espionage thrillers. Do you read fantasy?
I I I have read fantasy. I don't read a lot of fantasy.
Yeah.
Mostly that's because I don't get the chance to read as much as I want to. Period.
Yeah.
Um, I read a
What
lot
do
of
you
older
read for fun? Like when you just want to read, not because you're brushing up your chops because you're going to write this or that, because we all do that. I'm going to tackle this project, so I'm going to kind of bone up on what's popular right now. But when you just want to read a book because you want to get enjoyment from it, what do you read?
I mostly read older books that I've already read. um,
Same.
I will reread the Heinlein juveniles. I'll read um, Dean Koontz,
Yeah.
thrillers. Mostly his older stuff. I don't like much of his new stuff. Like when I say new stuff, I mean past the '90s. I will read. Walter John Williams, David Drake, things like that. Stuff that I've read before and I know I like. Finding a new book that I'm going to like is tough, particularly since like I'm kind of spoiled for reading because as a writer, the first thing you do is start picking things apart. So that's why older books are better for me because I read these first when I was in my teens or something, and or even
Yeah.
younger, and the nostalgia kind of glosses over
Yeah.
any literary problems there might be in them. Um, I also like reading nonfiction like history, military history. I
If
think
you
the
were
last book
going,
I bought was something about Wyatt Earp and the OK Corral. I've not
do,
finished reading it yet.
do you find things when you read completely off genre like that? Um, do you find elements of those stories that wind up in not necessarily in the stories that you're writing, but do you find that those things influence the way you think about it? And if someone could know your reading influences they could see, but it doesn't necessarily show up that way. But do you find that other things start to inform your writing style or little Easter eggs that you put in just for you or things like that?
Um, I don't know. I feel like military history does.
Yeah.
If I'm writing military science fiction, the military history definitely does come into it. I will drop in little personal experiences people have had.
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes to like say that Wyatt Earp thing, I mean, maybe some character thing, some exchange of dialogue will have an influence, but uh, not as much. I kind of like disconnect a little bit when I read stuff that's pretty far away from my
Sure.
genre. I'm doing it so I can not think about it.
Right. I get that. Um, if you were going to launch a new series,
I
something
am.
something completely different. Say you were going to launch this epic fantasy series,
Mhm.
um, and not start over from scratch. Period. And you could still maintain your contacts that you have accumulated over the years from your readers and newsletter lists and you know say you're the writer that you are today, but you want to branch out to somewhere new genre with new readers, all that. Um, what would be part of your strategy for launching a new series to a new bunch of readers, or at least a partial new list of
A
readers?
non-military, a non-science fiction series.
Non-science fiction. Say you were
Well,
gonna.
honestly, I have no idea. That's why I don't do it. I have talked because I really do want to write this fantasy series, and I've
Yeah.
talked to lots of people, and basically, um, you have two choices when it comes to writing epic fantasy. Sorry, three choices. Number one, you try to get traditionally published. That's your best bet. That's what everybody says, and it's also the hardest thing to do, and probably would never happen to me because trad publishing is all about we want something original, something that's not Tolkien-esque, something that's different, something that's not medieval European, but that's what
Right.
I want to write. So they would not publish it. Uh,
Right.
Second, and this is what has been suggested to me, is you try to reinterpret your plot into progression fantasy, which progression fantasy is similar to lit RPG without the statistics. Basically, it's a character who, as they go on in the story arc and in the book and in the series, they get to certain points where they become more powerful and gain skills and magical abilities. And basically, at the end, they're just this unstoppable force that blows through all opposition. Um, and also, it's geared towards younger people. So main character should be younger, like under 25. Um, or the third thing is you publish it because you love it and just want people to read it, and you aren't interested in making any money, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Which I wish I had the luxury of doing that.
Yeah. Does it does having success in publishing, um to the point that you, this is your income now. You are a full-time professional writer,
Mhm.
and this has afforded you the kind of life where you can do what you love. um does it ever feel like, the golden handcuffs, so to speak? Like, I would love to do this, but I'm locked into what pays the bills. And is there that sort of, not regret, but a little melancholy that comes with that?
No, no, not at all. I mean, I would be very ungrateful to feel that way because you know I am in a such a tiny percentage of all
Yeah,
writers uh,
yeah,
who get to do what they love for a living. Um, that I would be very ungrateful to feel like I'm trapped. Um, I sometimes feel like there's not enough hours in a day.
yeah,
Uh, but no, I don't feel trapped. I feel privileged to be in this position, and I I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I could go back and tell myself what's going to be like. I mean, I don't know if the me back then would say, "Oh, that's kind of rough." But me now, I can handle it. The only thing I worry about is that there'll be some major change because you got to understand, um, this is not like any other job.
yeah,
It's not like any other job anybody has really. Maybe musicians uh, or actors, who are not
yeah,
stars. Musicians or actors
yeah,
who aren't stars. Um, you're totally in a kind of a gig economy. Um, your income is totally dependent on the last thing that you put out. And if things go belly up, you have to adjust your plans really, really quick. And writing is not something that happens really, really quick. I mean, people think
yeah.
I write quickly, but you're still talking minimum of a month to get a book out,
Right.
and then probably at least 2 weeks to get it formatted and out into the wild. So anything happens that disrupts your income and you have to pivot and do something else, that's a minimum of 6 weeks just to get something else out there that you don't know if that's going to work. And if that doesn't work, then it's another 6 weeks. So um, just say worst case scenario, which isn't impossible. Um, Amazon divests itself of Kindle Direct Publishing. Now they probably would sell it to somebody else,
Right.
but say that everything changes about it and nobody knows the rules, nobody knows the algorithms. All these people who've been making buttloads of money all of a sudden have no idea what they're doing, and my income cuts off abruptly.
Mm,
Now things will even
yeah.
out. There would be a vacuum there because there are still a bunch of people that want to read
Yeah.
a book a day,
Oh, yeah.
then they will find a way to do it. But that may
Right.
take months for all that to shake out. So it's hard. I mean, and you try to save money in case of emergency, but it's
Sure.
hard to plan for that kind of thing, and you're constantly kind of living on the edge, and that's why a lot of people who make their money from writing have a pension or two pensions,
Yeah.
retirement, or investment, something else that they can count on if things fall apart. Um, I don't really have one of those. My wife has a retirement, but that's not going to be kicking in tax free for another 3 years or so. um, she has a pharmacist license, so she can get a job as a pharmacist. But one of the main things when I started doing this was the idea of letting her retire early. So that would be very disappointing if I'd say, "Sorry, honey, you got to go back to work." um, so yeah, it's very it's like it's not, I don't want to say it's stressful, but it's a constant background hum of the
Yeah.
possibility that things could go wrong very quickly.
Yeah. What's a great motivator to get up every day and
Oh
get the
yeah,
stories written? So what
yes it
is
does.
what's a typical production day look like for you these days?
It's not as much as I want it to be. I maintain a pace of 3,000 words a day every day until I get a book done, and then usually it's a week of plotting and planning uh, and outlining to get the next outline done and start and get started on the next book. Um, so I'm probably looking at, like, with a couple of small breaks during the year, you know, 9 books a year, 8 to 9 books a year. Um, so 3,000 words a day, pretty much constant, except for a couple of 2 week breaks during the year, and that's a good production level. But if I could figure out a way to work on two things, I used to be able to work on two things at once. Um, but that wasn't so much me changing that
Yeah.
did away with that. It was more the demands of keeping a book going in the Cheney verse, because you need to have it out every 45 to 60 days. So, and if you're working on two things at once, you know, I used to do like 2,000 words each in two different books. But that, if you're going to have a 90,000 word or 100,000 word book, that's is pushing the limit. You can't take 50 days to write it and maybe um, a week to plot it. That's not going to give you enough time to get it formatted and edited and everything and get it out there in less than 2 months. So basically, I've had to go to writing one book a month
Yeah.
instead. But I'm hoping that there's some way I can change that. Um, it's going to take some rearranging of how I write, because I don't know if you heard the term that your work expands to fill the time that you have
Yeah.
available.
Yes.
But if you say I'm going to write 3,000 words a day, then it's going to take all day to write those 3,000 words. So if
Right.
I want to write 4,000 words a day, then I'm going to have to figure out a way to squeeze more out of a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a keyboard? Because you spend a lot of time at the keyboard. Have you found a keyboard that you really love, that like this is the thing that your go to?
Well, I've gone through a lot of keyboards. Right now, I have this one. I prefer mechanical style keyboards.
Me
Or
too.
the um, I'm not crazy about this one, but I haven't really
Yeah.
found one that is perfect for me. Um, and honestly, when we moved here and I finally got a real office, I was like so glad, because in an office things are less distracting.
Right.
But I actually find that I get more distracted in my office, and I prefer to just sit on my bed and write on the laptop.
Isn't that
So
funny?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. When I wrote my first book, um, I was sitting at our kitchen table with a laptop with all the kids running around and making all the noise. And then, I finally graduated to an office, like you said, and it's so quiet and calm, and getting your brain to settle down when you're so used to the chaos of everything is that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah. Everybody's different when it comes to that. Like for instance, I like having background noise when I'm writing.
Yeah, me
Other
too.
people just have to have it dead silent, or maybe they'll put music on, but it can't have any lyrics in it. And I
Right.
like having something in the background. It like maybe I'm a little bit I don't know, ADHD or something, but I've got to have like something to break the silence. If I'm
Yeah.
sitting there with nothing but silence, um, it drives me nuts a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't help me at all to just be silent, non-distracted. So, Rick, I know there's always something new coming up. What's your next release? When's it coming out, and what can we
Well,
expect?
Drop Trooper 16 will probably be the next one. I finished the edits on it very recently, so I imagine it'll be coming out within a month. I mean, the current release date that they put on the pre-order is November, but I mean, it's out. It's everything's done with it now, so I'm sure it'll be out in September sometime. Um, I believe Taken to the Stars 8. I think it's scheduled for September. I can check that real quick because they're always on pre-order.
Yeah,
Um, that's one thing Jeff Chaney does is make sure the next one's on pre-order when the last one's released. It's scheduled to come out October 6th, but it will probably come out before that. Probably
gotcha.
more like September 20 something.
Excellent.
And the rest of those books will be scheduled to come out within like 2 months between them, basically.
Well,
Um,
we'll
I'm
link up
also oh
your
sorry.
Amazon. We'll link up your Amazon page since it's ever changing, and that'll be the easiest way for folks to. But anyway, I interrupted you. What were you about to say?
I'm also going to start working on two other new series at some point here. One for Athon and one for Cheney. They're both going to be, like I said, a little more on the adventure side and not the hardcore gritty military sci-fi side. We'll see if people like them.
So you think those will probably start debuting next year?
Yes, and most likely they will both start debuting next year.
Nice, nice. Always fun to have something to look forward to. Rick, as always, a pleasure to just get to chat and catch up. What's the best place for folks if they're just discovering you to find it? Is your Amazon page the
Yeah, it's very easy to find me on Amazon because I'm the only science fiction writer with this name. I'll just look for Rick Partlow on Amazon, and they will find me. The only other Rick Partlow's ever written anything is a B actor and Foley artist, and I think he wrote like a biography once. So in science fiction, I'm the only Rick Partlow.
nice, nice?
If you
Well,
want to
we
find me
will.
on Facebook, go to Science Fiction Worlds of Rick Partlow. Um, I also have rickpartlow.com, which is kind of an author blog that I do not post much on because I don't have time.
Your time is definitely appreciated. That all your time goes to your books. I think everyone can agree to that. So, but we'll link up all that to make it easier for folks to find you. Rick, thank you so much for taking time to come back on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Hank. I appreciate it.